In today's video, we have lots of NHL news and rumors as NHL training camps are getting ready to open. Today's trade talk, it surrounds Montreal, Columbus, and Vancouver. Plus, we have a major update on Canucks forward Dakota Joshua. We have some news on some PTOs, big signings in Dallas and Buffalo, plus lots of other RFA updates, including the latest on Mercer, Harley, Swayman, and Perfetti, and more. All that and more coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have all kinds of NHL news and some trade talk to take a look at today. Very, very busy news day with training camps getting ready to open. Players will report to training camps tomorrow. Most teams are having their players on the ice for the first time on Thursday. So lots of things kind of ramping up as we get ready to officially kick off the training camp portion of the NHL season. Before we jump into a lot of the other news regarding the current players, we do have some news on a retirement and another signing as well, which will lead to a player retiring with his old team. Chris Wideman has officially announced his retirement. We had discussed back a few months ago this was likely going to be the case. Obviously, Wideman didn't play. I don't think he played at all last year, very little. He's having a lot of issues with his back. He's ended up only playing 6 full NHL seasons, a little bit of time in the KHL as well. Mostly played with the Ottawa Senators, and he ended up bouncing around a little bit, went to the KHL, came back a few years with Montreal, and now has announced his retirement. So he's an undersized defenseman who kind of made the best of it, and obviously, like I said, never was a big superstar by any means, but certainly carved out a decent career for sure. So congrats to Chris Wideman on a successful run, and obviously best wishes to whatever comes next for him. And on October the 11th, the Vancouver Canucks are going to be signing longtime defenseman Alex Edler to a one-day contract, and he will retire as a Vancouver Canuck. It's believed that they're going to be putting him likely into the Ring of Honor. Usually those types of things is what follows next. Well, we don't have any details on that just yet, but he will be signing a one-day deal, retiring a Canuck, and they'll certainly celebrate his career there in Vancouver. Now, staying with Vancouver, some other news that we got today, which was quite surprising and not great news, but it sounds like things are kind of turning the corner here. But forward Dakota Joshua, who was the UFA this offseason and signed a new deal to remain with the Canucks, actually was diagnosed with testicular cancer. He's already gone through what he's had to. He's in the recovery phase. Ended up getting diagnosed over the summer, successfully removed the tumor, though, which is the good and most important part here. But unfortunately, he's still recovering from the surgery and will not be ready to start training camp. So he's still healing from that. So certainly thankful that he got checked out and that they caught things early enough and that he's going to make a full recovery. That's the most important thing here. Obviously, and there's no timeline given exactly on when he'll be joining the team. But that's, like I said, from one of those situations, it can be a scary ordeal. The fact that he's going to be okay and he's going to recover is the main thing here, but he will be missing at least part of camp. They haven't given us a timeline, so I'm not sure if it's likely that he'll be there by the end of camp or the first part of the season or what have you, but he'll miss some time for sure. A couple of PTOs that we learned today as most NHL rosters were announced for training camps. One, we've seen the Toronto Maple Leafs are bringing in another goaltender, John Gillies. He's going to camp on a PTO, and the Carolina Hurricanes appear to have Skyler Brindamore, the son of Rod Brindamore. Now, he was playing on an AHL deal with the HL franchise in Charlotte that still had a year left on it, but there's belief that that was mutually terminated because he is on the training camp roster of the Hurricanes, so he must have some sort of contract with them. As of the recording of this video, that has not been announced, but he is on their training camp roster. So trying to kind of figure that out, but I'm not sure if it's a two-way deal, NHL, AHL, if it's AHL only. We don't know exactly, or is he going on a PTO? Either way, he's part of the Canes organization here for now. We'll get the contract details or what exactly his status is here in the short term. We also had some news out of Edmonton today. Assistant General Manager Brad Holland, of course, the son of Ken Holland. Not a huge surprise, but he is mutually agreed, along with the Oilers, to part ways. So his contract's been terminated. So, of course, Ken Holland no longer with the organization. So, obviously, that's not a huge shocker that he would decide to move on as well. A couple of big signings today. We have one's an RFA that got a deal done, and one's a pending UFA that got a big extension done. The Dallas Stars today announced that the Finnish defenseman Esa Lindell has extended a 5-year deal at $5.25 million per season. Of course, Esa Lindell, regarded as one of the better defensive defensemen across the NHL, would have been a free agent next summer should he have elected to explore free agency. Obviously quite happy in Dallas. Obviously the team is quite happy with him as well. Gets a similar type contract that he's already earning. Obviously a well-respected member of their top 4 D core there. So certainly a pretty good contract for Lindell to remain with the organization. That'll take him obviously well into the latter part of his career. And the Buffalo Sabres today also came to terms with RFA Peyton Krebs. They had been on a stalemate for an extended period of time. He signs a 2-year deal at $1.45 million. A little bit surprised they signed for 2 years. And I thought, to be honest, he would get a little bit less money. I didn't think he had enough leverage to really justify that per se. But obviously, that ends up being the contract. So we'll see. That might make it tougher to move Krebs, to be honest. I know there's been some talk about his future in Buffalo. Obviously, the last year or so, especially trying to find the right fit there. I know they have a new coach with Lindy Ruff. Maybe things will be a little bit different. But he was obviously one of the main pieces that came in the Jack Eichel trade. So I'm sure they'd like to kind of find a way to make it work and for him to be more successful. So we'll see. But an interesting contract there. Of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs had a lot of people kind of kept in mystery here over the last number of days as they removed a lot of from their social media pictures and profile pictures. All of a sudden, a lot of O's were missing. So if you follow on social media, like I know a lot of you probably do, a lot of the NHL teams, the Leafs had a profile picture of the Leafs forever, and all of a sudden there's O's missing everywhere, and kind of let people, what is up with that? You knew something was going to come as an announcement of some sort, and we found out today, and it's nothing like anybody really thought. Turns out that the Leafs now have a sponsorship with Oreo cookies. Yes, on their helmet sponsor. Formerly, it used to be TikTok as a sponsor. Now they have Oreo, which is, how fitting is that they have milk on their jerseys, Oreos on their helmet, 2 brands that seamlessly go so well together. So yes, Oreo, in case you were following along and didn't see that announcement earlier, all the missing O's, Oreo cookie is the sponsor. So yeah, that's just, I'm sure they're going to get a lot of jokes about that. But, it is kind of funny that they go so well together. Some other updates around the NHL when it comes to the remaining restricted free agents, because there's still some big names. Even though we're slowly starting to see some of these situations get resolved, there's still a number of them outstanding. Jeremy Swayman being one. A lot of these guys were discussed on the first edition of TSN Insider Trading, which was put out just a few hours ago, with Darren Dreger and Chris Johnson talking about all these guys. Dreger went on to talk about Cole Perfetti for one. And they talk about Dawson Mercer, Thomas Harley, and Jeremy Swayman. With Mercer and Harley, it sounds like they're both trending towards being bridge deals. At this point, doesn't seem to be a lot of hope that they're going to end up getting a long-term deal done. Both sides appear to have some progress made. I know in Mercer's case, I've seen some reports from New Jersey media today as well, suggesting that it looks like things might be getting close. In case of Harley, Dreger said that it seems possible at this point that Harley will miss some time, but they're really hoping to get it done soonish so that he's at the very least not, out of the lineup to start the year, because he has developed into quite a big piece there on that blue line. When it comes to Swayman, the belief, according to Chris Johnson, was that there's still, status quo from what we've been hearing. No real significant updates, but I've seen some other people have a little bit different intel saying that they think things are closer than what some of the other national reporters might be having for intel. So we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, Swayman and the Bruins, I know one thing that Johnson did say was that they may be trending towards a bridge deal as well. They might have to find common ground on a shorter term, because clearly they've been trying to figure out a way to do an 8-year contract, but we know that Swayman's holding pretty firm for what he wants. His agent's also very notorious for, not caving on what their demands are. So we'll have to see how this works out. It could end up being a shorter term for Swayman than they would have liked, clearly, to get that number down a bit. I know with Mo Seider as well in Detroit, the talk there with Johnson and Dreger saying again that now Raymond got the 8-year deal in Detroit. It sounds like Moritz Seider may not. They don't want to go above the $8.7 million for either of these guys that Captain Dylan Larkin makes. They've made that a ceiling for any of the other player contracts, and it looks and sounds like Seider's camp is looking for more than the 8.7, which is why his deal is not done. Now, we had heard before that his contract was likely, or the asking price at the very least, was going to be somewhere around $1 million more than Raymond. Raymond basically got to 8 times 8, which is funny because it wasn't long ago that Elliot Friedman was talking about Raymond's camp using the Tim Stützle contract as a comparable, and that Eiserman and the Red Wings didn't really want to go there. It's like, well, he only got a tiny bit less than Stützle. And Stützle's a center and Raymond's a winger. So centers usually make a little bit more. So I found that quite surprising. But with Seider, to get the number down, they're going to have to go for less years by the sounds of it, because he's looking for, it sounds like, around 9 or more. So they're looking at maybe dropping from an 8-year deal, maybe down to a 6-year deal to get it somewhere around in the lower 8, maybe 8.5 or something in that range. So, yeah, that's a pretty tough negotiation. They certainly spent a lot of money on these core players. I mean, they're certainly big parts of the team, and I hope everything works out for them. But hopefully the Seider contract negotiation doesn't drag on too long. On the trade front, Chris Johnson also does confirm that the Columbus Blue Jackets are pretty active out there. That Don Waddell has made it clear they still want to add at least, was the term. It was not one more forward. It was at least one more forward. So I wouldn't be opposed or surprised to see them maybe even add 2. A couple of ways they're going to go about this. They're being pretty creative, but there's not much left out there on the UFA market. He said it's quite likely that they're going to be patient here, and if they don't make a trade, the trade market's probably the most likely, but if they don't do that, as players start going on waivers through training camp, they'll scour that market, maybe see if they can't find, maybe a younger-ish player. I'm going to say probably 25 and under. If somebody becomes available that they weren't expecting or something, they'll try to take advantage of that. So between waivers and trades, that's where they're likely going to be looking for. And he confirms that CBJ has been very active on the trade market. I've said it numerous times before. There's been some other intel suggesting they've had a lot of conversations with the Montreal Canadiens, and I would not be one bit surprised, like I said, if one of those forwards that are close to an expiring contract, like a Dvorak, for example, ends up being their target. We'll see. Maybe something better comes along, but at this point, I fully think that it's very likely. And now we have it from a national insider suggesting that they're very active in the trade market to kind of line up the other intel that's been kind of floating around and matching up here as well. Now, there's also an article from the Hockey News. We know that I want to look at regarding the Canucks and the goaltending. Now, we know the Canucks are still, likely at this point, not 100% confirmed, looking to add another goaltender as insurance, basically. We know they added Dylan Ferguson as a signing. He'll go, I think, or was he on a PTO? I think he's on a PTO. But he'll be in Canucks training camp. They are probably still looking for somebody with a little bit more experience, though, just in case Demko is going to be missing some time. The article in the Hockey News suggests that Vancouver, if they're going to do it via trade, that one of the prime teams for them to look to would be Detroit. Detroit has an abundance of goaltenders, and they suggest maybe cheap veteran Jack Campbell, who was bought out by Edmonton, signed by Detroit. I mean, I'm sure Campbell may not be thrilled with that because obviously he's a Michigan native, signs back with his home state team. I don't know how thrilled he would be to get moved, but he doesn't have trade protection, so it's possible. But looking at Detroit, they've got Cam Talbot and Alex Lyon at the NHL level. They have Campbell, and then on top of that, they picked up Gage Alexander, and they have Sebastian Cossa. So there's even too many goaltenders for the NHL and the American Hockey League. So they can definitely afford to part with somebody. They just got Alexander. They're not going to move Cossa. It doesn't make sense that Lyon or Talbot get moved. So could Jack Campbell end up on the move? And to be honest, if they don't trade him, he's going to have to clear waivers. And I don't know that anybody would necessarily pick him up, though. You would have to think, though, that there's different options for the Canucks to really seriously look at, though, you would think, right? I mean, Jack Campbell coming into Vancouver, I understand that they can definitely afford to move him. It would be a low-risk deal in a sense that, they don't have to worry about keeping him too long. But you got to think there's a better option out there based on how he's played in the past year. You would think, right? But this article suggests that that's something that they should look at. The other big thing that came across today as well was trade talk from analyst Eric Fichaud of TVA Sports in Montreal, suggesting that Montreal could trade Cayden Primeau this year. Now that I thought was quite spicy and interesting to take a look at. The kind of analysis around his here from Fichaud says that he's convinced that Cayden Primeau will get moved sometime during the season, and he's not going to finish this year as a member of the Montreal Canadiens. He feels that they should have an older goaltender mentoring Samuel Montembeault. That's if they're sold and convinced that Montembeault is their guy, for him to be the starter and main goaltender for the foreseeable future. Now, I found that kind of funny because I was like, well, didn't they just have that? They just literally traded Jake Allen. If that's the case, and if that's the approach they wanted to take, would they not have kept Jake and maybe considered moving Primeau already? Jake was already a goaltender who would have stayed and extended in Montreal for cheap money. I can guarantee you that he would have loved to have done that. He was committed to that team and didn't really want to go. He fought the trade he blocked the trade numerous times before finally accepting the deal to go to the Devils. So at the end of the day, I don't disagree with the logic from Fichaud, but I just don't see the team agreeing with that, considering they just had that option and moved on from it. Now, the other option here, I'm not entirely convinced that they wouldn't move Montembeault for the right opportunity. Pierre LeBrun just confirmed in a recent article here this week that when it comes to Nashville Predators' top young stud goaltender, Yaroslav Askarov, of course, he ended up being traded to the San Jose Sharks, but he confirmed there was 4 other teams very much in the mix, with Montreal being one of them. Obviously, for Montreal to be one of them, they would not have gone back to a 3-goaltender solution here with Askarov, Montembeault, and Primeau. Now, we know Nashville didn't want a goalie coming back. Montreal had obviously lots of other assets they could have considered. We know the Canadiens have a plethora of young, interesting prospects, both on the blue line and in the forward group. So, obviously they didn't like their offer as much as San Jose's, so it didn't happen. But clearly this tells me that if Montreal was going to go after Askarov, either they saw Askarov as an upgrade on Primeau and they were going to try to go with Montembeault Askarov, or they were going to try to move Montembeault and go with a younger talented, or go with an even younger tandem of Askarov and Primeau. I don't think that was the case. To be honest, I think when they were in the conversations for Askarov, I think they would have moved Primeau, seen Askarov as a major upgrade on him long-term with the age and contract of Montembeault, the hopes that Askarov could take over from him in a year or two. To me, that would have made sense what the strategy would have been. Unfortunately for them, it never worked out, so we may never know 100%. But I think that, to me, makes the most sense. But could they move Primeau this year? I think Fichaud might be onto something. I'm kind of not going to say he's 100% right or wrong, but I do think that if they see Montembeault as their guy, and they have a guy like Fowler coming up in the mix here from college, he looks really, really good as well. Maybe if an opportunity presented itself for them to get Primeau traded for another asset that they really liked, for example, in another area, then maybe they would do that. The only thing is with Primeau, if they did move him, what would they be going after? They've made a lot of other moves lately. They have tons of defensemen, a lot of which that they like. They've already gone after one big name forward, bringing in Patrick Laine this year. We've heard all the rumors about Zegras before. I guess maybe that might be a player of interest there. I mean, for the Ducks to be interested in Primeau, though, they'd have to move John Gibson. So hard to say, right? I just don't know the exact way everything could play out. But interesting to think that Primeau could be a trade piece this year. It's just hard to say exactly what they would target in order to be willing to move him. But let me know what you think. Is Eric Fichaud and TVA Sports onto something here with the Primeau idea? And if so, what do you think they would be willing to move him for? Let me know what you think in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.